So the date today is Wednesday 22nd, here with Carl Preisler and Brenda Adelman. Give my mistake in pronouncing your name. Did I pronounce it correctly, Brenda?
You did. Not a lot of people do.
Did I pronounce yours, Carl?
I wasn't really paying attention to my name, so you try again.
Carl Preisler.
Yes, that is correct. It's a
good.
German name, kind of, so it's pronounced like you would read German. EI is I, IE is E when you're pronouncing things.
Carl, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm originally from Ireland. My father was from Denmark, my mother Irish. Because we got lots of time, I'm going to give you a whole story. So my father was Lutheran and had to convert to Catholicism to marry my mum. So I guess I was brought up in a multicultural home in a very traditional town in Ireland, which was kind of unusual. And my brother, my half brother, was Protestant. I always believed I'd lived before. I remember when I was taught about religious knowledge in school, and we were taught about I think it was the Second Nicene Council of of Constantinople or whatever, where in the Christian church they decided that they would exclude the belief of reincarnation from the accepted beliefs for the Christianity going forward. And when we learned about that, I thought, that's really oh, I thought everybody knew they lived before. Why? How could you not know? You've not been around before. It's not that I remember stuff. It just seemed so obvious to me all my childhood that we've all been here before. But anyway, so I followed in my father's footsteps, became an engineer, worked overseas for a company that builds cement factories around the world. Had aspirations of being a classical singer, so gave that up and moved to London, where I took singing lessons. Didn't quite make it, probably because I left it too late. I was too old when I started having lessons. But on that journey then in London, I start to meet more people who were involved in the spiritual side of things. I went to some spiritual churches, did some meditation classes, trained in Reiki, and then that was when, with all that going on, Spirit called me to be a trance medium, which surprised me no end, because my nature is one who likes to be in control and to be not giving up my autonomy to anybody. But I went along with it, and so now I've been a trance medium since nearly 25 years at least. I've also trained in clinical hypnosis, and studied and read a lot about other things that help explain the mind, belief systems, how we fit in the world. And yeah, my preferred, I guess, mode of working with people is I like to be of service. So I like helping when I can. I like healing when I can. I like doing healing in trance. I find that trance healing brings a particular vibration, at least that's my guides explain, that because they're channeling through me, they can have a more, you could say, grounded or lower frequency connection with the person being healed, and therefore extract and remove heavy energies, dark energies that can be stubborn with just hands-on healing. Because sometimes you have to get a shovel in to get the shit out. And so that's a very physical thing for me. When I'm doing that, it become super hot and a lot of things go on. But I find that to be a rewarding way of healing. And also I like to sit in circle and do soul rescue through trance, where I, as the trance medium, allow the trapped souls to take over or use me as a speaking box for those who are in the circle to help, to reach out for their help to move on into the light.
I have a couple of questions for you, but before I ask them, I'm gonna ask Brenda to speak a little bit about herself. But just in case I forget what the questions are, I'm just gonna voice them. Number one is about hypnosis, so I'll come back to that. And number two is about soul rescue. So I'll ask you a couple of questions in a moment.
And my latest thing, just sorry, is to use special radiesthesic pendulums for healing.
I've seen those. Fascinating.
Yes. So I've got like a few different ones, and I'm considering getting another one. So I've got like an Isis and an Osiris Isis, and so, and I find them actually very interestingly powerful when doing healing, and together with my kind of trance mode, it just seems to hone in on stuff a lot more precisely.
I want to come back to you on that as well.
Sorry, Brenda, I'm stealing all your glory.
No, somebody's
room for everyone.
Somebody's coming into the group as well. I recognize the I recognize the name, but I'm not quite sure who it is. And then their picture appears, and you'll see them. Hopefully, are you there? R2ZAW. It's like R2D2. Are you there? If you are, could you please say hello or type to us? Are you there, person? Okay, well, they're choosing to remain anonymous. Hopefully they will say hello in a moment. Okay, Brenda, let's hear from you.
Yeah, that pendulum stuff was interesting. I used to use pendulums for a while for myself when I lived in Sedona, so I've never heard of that. So that's cool. Well, yeah, they're beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the geometric, the geometry is supposed to be what's particular about them, to give off different vibrations of light thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Not a crazy stalker, it's my friend Sayera. It's all good.
Oh, good. So, excuse me. I grew up in Brooklyn with a very alpha male father and a bohemian artist mom who totally didn't fit in. It definitely was not multicultural at all. It was Brooklyn is a very interesting place to grow up, very colorful, but also a lot of, it's harsh too. But then I, moved to Manhattan later on, but what to say, I started out acting as a little girl. My mom took me to Broadway shows from the time I was 3 years old. I also learned to shoot a gun when I was around 10 with my dad. So I am definitely this mix of these very different people. And I was not spiritual. I didn't grow up spiritually at all. I think I went to synagogue, once a year during the High Holy Days as far as being religious. Although my mother was definitely a healer. I remember she had healing hands, definitely. And she had these insights. And as someone growing up in Brooklyn, it was so bizarre. Like my mom didn't fit in anywhere. And it's so funny because she was also an artist and a photographer. And I just adored her. I saw her as someone who saw the world differently than everybody else. And then in 1995, my dad, who I adored, shot and killed my mother. And within months moved in with my aunt, my mother's sister, and my world just blew apart with that gunshot. And I lost my family. I lost life the way that I knew it. And what it did was, and today I'll be talking about the transformative power of storytelling, is I spent a few years in a lot of darkness, a lot of loneliness, not being able to accept love, feeling so damaged. I dropped out of acting, and then I got back into it in a class in Los Angeles, kind of hiding through the characters that I would play and being able to express myself, even experience joy again through the characters. But then I would get off stage and just be miserable and not want to live. And it was really through having the pain be so much that we can either sink or swim. And I did everything I could to feel better. But it was actually after a friend of mine said, if you take your own life, you're not going to be with your mother. And that was enough for me to shift and say, oh, she would want me to thrive. She would not want me to just be existing or sub-existing at that point. And so I went to healers, I went to therapy, I went to acupuncture, I got the cords cut, I got, I did the primal scream workshops, but it was really starting to write out my story, but I'm going to talk about this after, that helped me. It really helped me to heal. And so I was able to look at my story, put it down on paper, have compassion for myself. And then I did end up writing my story into a stage presentation. And then which I've performed all over the world, but it was the pain that pushed me into my spirituality and understanding for me that there's something bigger going on, that I even chose my parents. I chose these lessons, and then moved me into that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. Like, I didn't know that before then. So I do coach storytelling, and I started out actually as a coach teaching forgiveness with my proven forgiveness process, and it's part of what I'll teach after. It was just, once you have this knowledge, how do you keep it to yourself? Part of healing is being able to share what you know as well and help other people. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate your authenticity and your vulnerability in the way that you spoke. Thank you. I saw it and I felt it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sayera, are you there? Would you like to say hi?
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I am all the better for seeing you all. I know that you're an actress as well, Sayera, right? Tell us a bit about you.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you for sharing your story. What's your name? The lady?
Brenda.
Sorry, Brenda Adelman.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. What was my story? I'm from Portsmouth originally, and I started dancing when I was about 3, I think, and then gosh, I was going to go into something a bit deep, but I don't think I should.
No, please just reveal whatever in your heart.
I was just going to say that. No, but it's a bit. No, I was just going to say I kind of grew up with a lot of racism because I grew up in the 70s, and so my sort of escape, I suppose, was music, singing, dancing, all that kind of stuff. And then my parents divorced when I was 7, and my dad's from Bangladesh, and I never learned to speak Bengali. So it's like, I could have learned to speak Bengali, but I never did. So I've always kind of grown up with my mother's tongue, which is English. And and then moved to London after school, and ended up in doing a musical theatre course, actually. And I never made it into the West End, which was kind of my dream at the time. And I still enjoy singing, music, dancing when I can. Yeah.
I've known Sayera for many years, and when I started my healing group, it was a different name, and it was in my home when I lived in a different place, which was very beautiful. Sayera used to come along. And I know you have also suffered a traumatic loss, Sayera, and that you've also battled with mental illness.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind me sharing this. This is
That's okay.
a safe space, and it's a healing space for everyone to really, open up as much as possible, and we hold each other in love and non-judgment here. And I know that Sayera's sister, who you sadly lost, was a famous actress.
Yeah,
she was on a famous soap in the UK. and everybody knew her.
And she was also did lots of Bollywood, like the item numbers in Bollywood films, and yeah.
And just speak, if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit about, you know, your personal journey with acting and what brought you to acting.
Well, this is going to sound pretty mad, but it's actually a lot to do with Sophie. So I've got two sisters. I'm in the middle one, my older sister, my younger sister. And, you know, I was saying about my dad not being around. So my mum was very domineering. And my two sisters were, God, sorry, I don't want to take up all your time, but my two sisters were away from home a lot. They were off at ballet school. And I used to hear my mum going on the phone to my grandmother about, my sister's called Aisha and my younger sister's called Sophie. And I used to constantly hear her talk about them and kind of not talk about me. So I don't know, obviously had issues there. And then when I saw Sophie, she went to dance college. She was only 13 at the time. I must have been 16. And the thing about her hugging all these show busy theatrical kids, stage school kids, I suppose, it was more the fact that they were very close and huggy. And I thought, oh, I want that, right? So a lot of my path has probably been not dictated, I don't know if that's the right word, sorry. Me following trying to follow my sister's footsteps, because when she passed away, I actually said to one of my close friends who knew Sophie from school, I said, I don't have any competition anymore. I don't have any kind of like sort of, she was doing something, say in Coronation Street, and I thought, oh, I need to be doing something. So I didn't feel like I had any inspiration maybe, or competition or something.
Well, yes, a kind of a competitive motivation, I suppose.
Yeah, but in a good way, because I then like I mean, I know I'm older now and people get a bit lazy when they're older, but you know, the kind of the competitive thing about, oh, Sophie's doing this, so I'm, you know, that kind of thing. And yeah, and actually, no, to be fair, when she passed away, I did try and do a bit more acting stuff. Yeah, but I don't know what's happened lately. I think I'm just going, actually, Alexis, I'm going through a healing process about my childhood stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So, yeah.
It's lovely to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really brave of you.
Well, thank you for listening.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. And
but definitely, I mean, it really stuck in my head about the hug thing. And I was like, I kind of want that love or whatever, adoration, I don't know, something like that. Maybe.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we all need that kind of external approval until we finally love ourselves, right? And then we can also teach or be part of the process of helping other people to love themselves by loving ourselves. And I think that kind of reflects with what you're going to talk about, Brenda. And I just have a question before I go to Carl and ask the questions that I wanted to ask. What is your heritage, Brenda? Brenda.
Oh, my heritage?
Yes.
My family originally, my ancestors were from Kiev and Poland and England.
Oh, England. Oh, I was sensing the I was sensing the Russian stuff, but I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, and I only went because, you know, everything was demolished there from my ancestors, you know, just with what's going on in that part of the world. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. Carl, you said Danish is your ancestry. Do you know much about your ancestry?
Oh, I know lots. It's my current hobby. I can go back to 1450 on my father's side and 1650 most of the other branches.
It's so
I can bore you for hours if you want.
I just want to acknowledge that our ancestors are with us, and you know, one of the early sacred segments was really powerful. There was a guy that does family constellations therapy called Anu. Anu Azrael, I think his name is. He goes by, and it was one of the most powerful and memorable for me because he did some really incredible ancestral healing work, and I've never forgotten how amazingly healing it was. Me personally.
I have to say, I do think I've spent the last 5 years doing very detailed research, and I'm not finished yet. My partner thinks I'm addicted, and I am a little bit, but I do find it not healing for me, but it's very opened your heart a lot when you go and you find out so much about like your ancestors before, and you see some of them, and you like getting an indication of, you know, how long the lifespan was back in maybe, you know, a couple of 100 years ago. And there was one family where half their children died in their infancy, you know, and you think about like, you know, what those tragedies must have done to those families and how strong they were to keep going. And so I do feel it's a way of honoring them and honoring like what they've been through, just to read about it and document it and put it. If I can bore you for a tiny little bit, if you go to wikitree.com, which is like Wikipedia for families,
Right.
and search Preisler, you'll find I've like created thousands of records already, because it's a resource that everybody can access for free forever, like a Wikipedia.
Okay.
So all my cousins and their children who will come in the future, they will be able to find all this stuff online. And I think it's a wonderful way to honor our ancestors and the trials and tribulations that they would have gone through, you know, those who were alive during the First World War and the Second World War, those who lost like some of their family members in the wars or through illness. So yes, and I discovered that actually on my father's side, much closer than he never mentioned it, but his grandmother was actually Swedish, you know, and he never mentioned it. So there's like strong half Swedish, half Danish, a lot of Irish too, but
Interesting. I think the past and our ancestors inform us as to who we are right now.
yes, yeah.
I just want to mention time, because I said to Brenda that her segment would start at past. I had some issues coming onto the Zoom thing. I'm just going to ask you if it's okay for us to be a little flexible with the time, because it's a smaller group. Is that okay? And maybe you start your segment in maybe perhaps 5 or 10 minutes so that I can ask this question. Is that okay, or are you running out of time?
I am running out of time.
Okay, no problem. Well, then in that case, I will ask you the questions after Carl.
Yeah,
and I will
absolutely.
ask you to start in just under 30 seconds. I'm just going to say thank you for being here, and appreciate you all being on Sacred Segments. Brenda, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the family constellation is something that's very interesting to me, especially as an actress too, right? Because there's the acting out of family things as well. And there was something very interesting that when I was in my master's in spiritual psychology, they had us go through our ancestors and actually look at the patterns that were repeating in it. I mean, we only went like 3-4 generations back, but the pattern. So it wasn't just, who married who and things like that. It went beyond that too, which is probably some of what they do in family constellations. I don't know, which is, was there domestic violence? Were there secrets? And that was really interesting to see how that affected me today as well.
Brilliant work, yeah.
So yeah, I was just today I'm going to talk about the transformational power of storytelling. And I was just jotting down a few notes before I came on here. So for me, owning my life story and the events that happened to it, and transcending the tragedy has been pivotal to me enjoying a life filled with love, filled with self-love, amazing relationships, and actually my creativity, and being able to take my creativity on the road, and help so many other people. So, so I really believe that what we've lived through, if we look at it in a certain way, can really empower us. And so I wanted to speak about a few things. So for everyone watching too, it's like looking at the events in your life and noticing maybe the narrative of your life before something tragic happened and after, because I know it was different for me. I remember going to this like entrepreneurial event before my mother was killed by my father, and they said, you know, go around the room and network and say 3 events that, you know, are unique to you. I was just jotting down, like, one was that I shopped through a typhoon in Hong Kong. I had a best friend that died when we were both 15. She died of cancer. And that I went to my first Broadway show at around 5 years old, which is interesting. And we all want to look at the stories in our lives and, you know, what is unique to you that someone else can, especially for those of us who are entrepreneurs who are like doing interviews and things like that, like what can you give of yourself that's specific that could help your audience connect with you and relate to you. But then I looked at how after my mother was killed, that was the only story that I could focus on. It was in my mind. I was obsessed with it. I was, you know, do I love my father? Do I hate my father? I wish I could turn back time, like looking at those events in our lives that changed us forever. We became a different person. But also, how do you move yourself into the present when you've lived through something like that? And that's what happened for me. But I've, you know, I have developed and directed over 200 people for the stage already. And then there's more clients, but those are ones I've given a stage for. So I've heard what people have gone through, but like the real stuff, like underneath, I feel like we're taught so much to just move on because you can't change the past anyway. And yet my processes and the healing part of this transformation happens when we look at our stories, bring a witness in, a lot of self-love, a lot of compassion versus just compartmentalizing, because I've compartmentalized. We all do have to at certain points. But when we compartmentalize, or when we shut parts of ourselves down because we're afraid of that story, we're also shutting our heart down to ourselves and to other people. So we can succumb to the events in our lives, or we can transform and transcend them. And that, I guess, is what I want to talk about today. So the biggest healing for me happened. So after my mom died, I went to therapy. The biggest healing that happened for me was actually when I started journaling at night. It was about 3 years after my mom died. And instead of keeping everything in my head, I wrote down the story. It was during my sleepless nights when I was just in my brain and in the past and trying to rewind time. And I wrote down what happened. And all of a sudden, I just remember crying. And when I read what I wrote the next day, just having so much compassion for myself that I never had when I was in the place of compartmentalizing and putting it in the past or obsessing about the future and stuff like that. I just had so much. It was like I was a witness to what I'd actually lived through beyond trying to deal with it. And that was really a breakthrough in my healing. And what I would say, I want to share just my 3-step forgiveness process in here so that I can kind of explain what I mean by owning our stories and then potentially sharing your story in a very deep, authentic way that is healing for yourself and healing for others. So the first step of my process, of course, I didn't have the process then. That's why it took me so long to get out of my depression and even onto stage and sharing, is moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is. So what that meant for me was that I kept denying that my father was responsible for my mother's death. I kept trying to believe his lies about how it was an accident, even though there were 8 hours before the police were called, his gun disappeared. But this happens for people in so many different ways. They're with someone who's cheating on them and they refuse to believe that they're cheating. Someone has a drug addiction and they want that person to heal so much that they just believe it and keep, maybe giving them money or enabling when they think they're helping, like instead of moving out of denial and moving into acceptance of what is. For me, Another way of moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is that my father definitely was a narcissist with, you know, probably sociopath too. I didn't know that until I did. And when I did, it freed me because I realized he's never going to see the light. He's not going to come clean and stuff like that, like, because he didn't think the way that I did. So it also moves me out of making someone wrong. And that's not to say we don't have discernment, because we do. I forgave my father, and I also took him to court for wrongful death, but out of a place of self-honor versus revenge, which was healing for me, because it's all about healing ourselves. So the first step is moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is. And actually in this stage, there's a few exercises. I feel like this one exercise in particular, I didn't move out of my depression because I did not know. And this is actually embracing that you are a victim, that you've been victimized, that you've been hurt, that someone did something wrong to you or someone else. And it's embracing your anger in a healthy way, because if not, it seeps into other relationships. It seeps into, you know, becomes self-hatred, becomes addiction. So some of the ways to have a healthy release of anger, and I know I'm speaking to a lot of healers here, is free-form writing. Writing out your emotions, or screaming out your emotions in a healthy way, you know, but giving that emotion a voice instead of squashing it. So you want to do it in a healthy way. I'm not a therapist. There are primal scream workshops. That was so helpful for me. But that free-form writing is something you can do on your own, as long as, you know, I believe everybody, you know, if you're healthy, like if you have severe PTSD or something like that, absolutely talk to your therapist. I always say that. But I've also witnessed hundreds of people, and then even in my master's program, and I volunteered at a women's prison, do the free-form writing and get healing from it. So that is 15 minutes to 2 hours. You are not rereading your writing like you would be journaling, because then you're anchoring back in the emotion. You're doing first person present tense. I am so effing angry. Why did this person do this? Like, really go there. And by the way, it took me about 3 years to even get to that level of anger. So it's okay wherever you are. Like, I am open to knowing that I have more anger to release. Or maybe it's sadness and you have extreme grief, giving that a voice, witnessing, so when you're doing it, you also have your higher power there, or inner guide, whatever that is. So that person, that part of you is holding a space, is not hurt, harmed, or endangered, and can witness this part of you that is releasing. So that if it ever feels like it's too much, you just, the inner guide is there to say, I hear you. You're so brave. You're so courageous. It's okay. That's it. That's just the short version of it. And then you do formally end the writing session so that you don't take that energy into the rest of your day. When I was in my master's program, they had us do that for 30 days straight. So it's committing to do one day at a time, or committing to do 30 days, so that if you only have 15 minutes one day, you write out your energy, you know, you write it out, you know, you don't get stuck, because you know you're coming back to yourself the next day. You're trusting yourself. Another thing is to sign up for something like a primal scream workshop, or, you know, working with a therapist around that. But it is also acknowledging how angry you are, acknowledging how sad you are, so that it, like I said, doesn't seep into the rest of your life. So then inner child would be something that could be an exercise during this time as well. Just loving yourself for what you've been through. Be the parent. Like, I have worked with a lot of people who still are in blame of their parents. And while it is maybe what happened, they were not good parents, you're hurting yourself right now in the present moment. All my work is about empowering people. So it's taking on the qualities of the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and be the mother, the father that you didn't have, with those qualities, so that that's in your power to heal. The second step then is actually giving up your need to be right. So there's a lot of people stay in, I'm so angry, that person was so wrong, but you're hurting yourself. You're not having a spaciousness to create with. And so in this step, when you're ready, the way I found compassion for my father is I found a picture of him when he was a little boy. And I remembered I could tap into that part of him. And I remembered how he was brought up, and I remembered what his mother was like, which was not good. And I had compassion for the mental illness I'm sure he had, you know, that he was suffering through, and not ever condoning what he did, but it softened my heart, and that's what it is about. So that is the giving up the need to be right. I have a series of questions. I have a book. I don't have it in front of me, but I have a series of questions that you can tap into with this. Would be something like really coming from that perspective. And not everybody can do this. And I'm not saying you have to do this. Like, I've worked with enough people who have been abused. You don't have to do that with your abuser. This is all, you know, if this helps you, if it's someone maybe that you loved or, you know, respected at some point, or, you know, just can't get it out of your consciousness, but, you know, it's that duality. This is a really good one. So you could ask you could do a thing where you're like interviewing the person. What was your childhood like? And just energetically understand what that person went through, if it helps you. And then the third step is about giving to others, learning the lesson and giving it to others. And that is where, I guess, me turning my story into a one-person show, that's where that came from. So it was like, once I realized, well, I put my story on stage. I was already an actress. I knew how to write. I turned some of the poetry I had written, which was my form of releasing anger. I turned them into scenes. I put some scenes together in my acting class because I knew I was hiding. I knew I was filled with shame. I hadn't done the inner work yet, but I knew I needed to get it out and be real in front of the class of 100 people. Like, that was my next step, but it was like divinely guided. I need to tell my story. And I got a standing ovation, and I was looked at differently. Like, all of a sudden, I was witnessed in who I really was versus hiding who I really was from everybody. That's contagious. And so I had a director who wanted to work with me, a producer who wanted to work with me, and it was a snowball effect. And I put my first show up, an hour-long show, and people laughed and people cried, but I was absolutely miserable because I hadn't done the inner work. So it's when I finished, went back to school, got my master's in spiritual psychology, rewrote the ending of my show where I took my dad to court, and ultimately it's about the power of forgiveness, and mostly self-forgiveness. I've helped multiple tens of thousands of people because I share my story, but because, and I did it wrong in so many ways in the beginning, right? I was still a victim to what happened, or emotionally, I wasn't willing to really show people how dark it was. And when I learned to heal myself, combining it with the acting skills, all of a sudden I was impacting people, and people were inviting me on their stages. And it was not stuck energy emotionally. It was an energy of giving. And so, and then I was able to turn it into forgiveness. The first version of my show was about, will I ever trust and love myself? Will I ever trust and be able to love anyone again? And I feel like writing in the way that I did allowed that to happen. So, yeah, so that's it. You know that you're able, like, it's time to share when you also know your witness is there and you're not caught in the energy of I must be heard, which is something that activates people and gets people to start, but you can really, really make more of an impact and have a really tremendous life when you have the witness there, and you can even at some point find enough distance from it so that your story is a gift to others. So that's my thing. That's my talk. Are there any questions or?
I know our experience is probably pale in comparison to yours, but it really resonated when you said how people saw you differently because you were able to truly express the depth of some of the darkness in your truth. And I think even for like small things, we're so conditioned by our upbringing to not like make a big thing out of stuff, that like even small traumas, we try and minimize the impact so as to appear more strong or whatever, but it's still the same, still has the same like impact in that we're denying a truth within that needs to be expressed a bit more openly and honestly so it can be released and healed. So even if it's only a smaller thing, you know, I really hear what you said, because even those small things need to be expressed and grieved. And, you know, we've all had our share of tragedies, and, you know, someone who broke my heart, and, you know, I would literally start crying on the bus, just tears would run down my eyes because I was, you know, so in such like a place of sadness about it. But I never, one of the things that I kind of understood at the time was that I wasn't going to do myself any favors by denying the way I felt. I had to allow it to go as deep as it needed to without wallowing in despair, but to kind of allow it to process so that it wouldn't fester. And eventually, it took a long time, and eventually it comes out. But I think culturally we're so conditioned to avoid doing that because it's perceived as self-pity or whatever, you know, and it isn't. And it takes bravery to be able to understand that, and then even more bravery to embrace that understanding and share wholeheartedly like you did.
Thank you. Yeah, and those little things that we think are little are not. It's all relative. Because if you know, my father killed my mother, but I remember being in a class where someone had a breakup of like they were with the person only 3 months, and they were as devastated. They were like, we all come from our own experience, and we all come from what we can handle. And what I would say is, it is important also to know, especially when you're in this vulnerable place, who you're sharing with. Because there are people who will judge you, and you don't want to be like all open when someone's going to judge you, because that could be harmful. One of the things about sharing on stage, which is so interesting, is you have the stage, you have the audience. No one's going to interrupt you. Or sometimes we're going through this stuff and you're telling someone who, like a sister or brother, someone who you think could really, you know, relate. And sometimes they try to fix you and stop the emotion when that's not, you know, they think that's making it better instead of the healing is in the emotion, you know. But it is really important to like recognize where you are and not make it, not overindulge, but also be like, I am still hurting. That's okay. And I need to express this, and especially do, you know, do the inner work so that when you're out, you can still express it, but not ever make it worse for yourself, you know.
You really made some very valuable points there. Thank you. Sayera, do you have any questions?
You said something that you were doing your performance and that you were miserable. How did you like overcome that, I suppose?
Oh my God.
Sorry, go. Yeah.
No, go ahead. What was it?
I was just going to say, do you have any siblings? Do you have any support network?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say sibling as the support network, but yeah, what happened was people would laugh, people would cry, and I'd go home and be miserable. This was the very first time I did the show many, many years ago. And the way that I got over it is I literally went back and finished my master's degree in spiritual psychology. And I didn't go on stage for a couple of years. And I learned how to take care of myself and set healthy boundaries and get the anger out and all that stuff, so that when I came back to the stage, because I will say, even in 2019, I was performing and I had another huge breakthrough around my father then. And what happened was, when I put the show on stage, which I had done so many times, at a part where I'm angry, I broke down in sobs on stage. And it was almost like I was back to that time when I found out. It was a brilliant show, because thank God I'd done it so many times, so I didn't just lay down and sob and not be able to say anything. But it was really hard. And at the end of my show, and I do teach this with storytelling, there's always something uplifting, a question or something hopeful for the audience and for myself. But I couldn't really get there, even though the words were there. And I did it the next night. And I was on, it was a show with 2 other women. It's called Divas in Danger. I was doing 35 minutes of my show. And one of the women was supposed to come on at the end and get laughs, and it was impossible. And then the next day, I was like, okay, what is this about? And I got on again, and it was still very rough. I had finished the performance and I was sad. And then I got to look at my script again, which I had done for over 10 years, and say, oh my God, I had this moment where I had an experience with God, a direct experience with God. And it helped me so much. And up until that point in performing my show, I never showed, I talked about it versus experiencing it. And so in 2019, I was able to say, oh, I have to actually live that on stage. And when I did, it lifted everything up and made the performance better. So, so now I can I live into that, so that when I do the show at that depth, that level, I can still go to that level, but then it's an experience on stage that the whole audience experiences, and then it's uplifted at the end. And the other thing was that my brother is my half brother. Good question. And it was my father who killed our mother. And it's my older brother. And it actually caused a rift between us for 6 years, because I was daddy's little girl, even though I was an adult, and I just was in denial. I talk about that denial, and I didn't want to believe my father really killed her, and he knew, really. But he also didn't have the skills to, like, say, you know, we didn't have the skills to talk together and accept each other's opinion. And so we didn't speak for 6 years. And then when I made the decision to take my dad to court for wrongful death, I applied all of the skills I learned in my master's program to forgive my father, to forgive my brother. Like, he abandoned me. I was so alone. But then I went into remorse, and I was like, well, I abandoned him. So then I flooded myself with self-forgiveness. And so we reconciled, and he actually produced my show in Vienna, Austria back in 2007. He was producing a Jewish theater festival there. So yeah.
And do you still do your show now, or?
I do. The first one back since the pandemic was in October in Santa Monica, and during the pandemic, I had a couple of theaters in LA and in San Diego produce the show. And now I'm kind of having a fight, because I've been focused on helping other people during the pandemic, and now I'm like, I want to put my show back up again. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask? Your show must be such an emotional roller coaster. How do you manage to stay emotionally healthy in spite of all of that? Is it because you only do a certain number of shows and you give yourself time in between? But I imagine it must be, you know, I can understand that there's a kind of a drama persona and there's the you, but you're still, it's so meshed in with, you know, your own true experience. It must be hard to not live it truly, that emotional roller coaster on the stage. So how do you maintain a healthy emotional sense of self afterwards?
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of my clients also are like, how do you not relive it? Because as an actor, you want to be in the moment. But here's the thing, when you're healthy, I'm in the moment, but I know I'm on a theater stage in 2024. I'm not back in 1995 when my mother got killed. But what I also do, in some ways, it's more at this point, because I've done it so much, it's more, how do I actually get the emotion up and be present, because I've done it so much. And what I do when I'm on stage, and I've done it, you know, once here and there, I've done it for 5 weeks at a time. I set an intention before each performance, actually, to learn something new about myself. And it's exciting to do it, because I have like 10 characters in there, and there's a lot of humor in the first part of the show. It's very humorous until it's very raw, and then it's very healing. So it's like a process. I actually have a forgiveness ceremony toward the end of my show, so I get to go through that with the audience at the end. So that's like built in, the healing is built into it. And then it's actually so like healing to be able to be my father, you know, but he's many different things. He's not just that one event, or, you know, to be my mother, and like express all these things that in life we're not able to express.
Yeah.
That's how.
There was a really beautiful moment when you were talking at the beginning, about your mother, and you know, all of the beauty that you embodied and still do. I think you know, I can almost feel her through you, and yeah, you're very beautiful, and I think that you embody that. And I love how you use color. I think it's very magical, very magical.
Yay. Thanks.
I also want to say that I feel a massive amount of resonance for many of the things that you've said and many of the experiences that you've gone through. You know, that there were certain things that you said that really aligned with some of the experiences that I've had. There was something that you said about the victim, which was very interesting, about owning that part of yourself. Because we're taught not to play the victim, right? And that's unhealthy, but that kind of turns it on its head, what you spoke about. And that was very interesting to me. Just, you know, taking ownership of your victimhood just for a moment to allow it to heal, right?
Oh yeah, because otherwise it seeps into other relationships, seeps into all other parts of our lives if we don't own it. It's
Yeah.
just a part of the human condition.
Mm.
You know, just love that victim mentality, but then don't identify as it.
Right.
You know?
And in some of the work that I'm doing with the positive intelligence, it labels the victim as one of the saboteurs, but then recognizing it. And when you said about witnessing your you know, your trauma, you could not be part of it but witness it from afar. I think that's also very, very empowering, isn't it, to be separate. I think it's something along the lines of that saying of being in the world but not of it. You know?
Right, exactly. It is almost like when you can get far enough away from it, and that's, I think, something having to do with also when I do the show on stage, there's me, Brenda, at this age doing the show. There's me playing myself at different ages. And then there's the witness, the divine part of us that's here, you know, holding it all. So it's like we're looking at the movie of our lives, you know, like we all, right? Don't you all have a voice in your head that's watching this as we're doing it? It's actually, you know, playing that, being in all of it, you know, at the same time.
It's very alchemical what you have done and continue to do. And I didn't know that spiritual psychology was a thing, and I'm fascinated to learn more about it. And I very much hope that you will come back onto segments and speak specifically about spiritual psychology, because it's an area that I'm very fascinated in, and I think would be useful for other people as well.
That was life-changing for me, you know, having that degree, because I used to say my life was, you know, before what happened with my parents and after. And then when I took that program, it was like my life so completely changed before that program and after. Yeah.
It seems that you have a very, very intelligent and emotionally intelligent grasp of what happened, and have taken that process and not only been able to heal yourself and your trauma, although of course we're all human and we still carry our trauma, right? But you optimized it to the point where you're using it for a force for good, which is incredible. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize that. This is wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you.
I had a similar kind of understanding yesterday when I was doing some thinking about certain things. What we have to do is we do need to acknowledge that we experience certain things, you know, and we should honor the experience, but we shouldn't mistake doing that as identifying with the experience. And what we tend to do is we identify and define ourselves by the experience. And that's not what life is about. Our life is about to have these experiences that we grow spiritually, but to stay identifying as a spiritual being and not identifying as a victim, or identifying as, you know, somebody who's you know, being abused. We don't deny the experience, but we have to retain our own inner identity and not the one that's been projected onto us through an experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very valid point, right. Does anybody have any further questions for Brenda before we move on? Because I have some questions for you, Carl, that I'd like to come back to.
No, no, I just I
Just
love
say
the
thank
energy that she gives off. You know, I love, you just give off so much strength, Brenda, and I think, you know, you're obviously an inspiration to many and to us here on the call, and it's wonderful to see how transformative even some of the darkest things in life can be, and you're a testament to that.
Go ahead,
Thank
Sayera.
I was just going to say thank you for sharing that. My mum's actually Jewish, so I have sort of Jewish connection.
Yeah,
Did you say
my partner's Jewish as well. And
God.
his family were from Kiev as well.
And my great-grandfather was from Israel.
Oh my goodness.
And I never knew that because I was always told that he was from Egypt, and I figured it out. And I questioned my grandma when she was alive, and I was like, "Was he from Israel?" And she slowly nodded her head. I think so, she said. But
you.
his name was Avram, so it's very.
But it's interesting, and I know it's kind of digressing a little bit, but you know, the whole conversation reminded me of one of my cousins in Denmark. He you know, it's kind of on the subject of assisted dying. He was a well-known Danish producer of TV series and like short movies, and his wife had suffered from dementia for many years, and they had made an agreement that, you know, if the time should if it get like if she wasn't worth living, that he would help her. And this is only like was just around Christmas, and they did it, but he failed. He tried, like he took an overdose as well, but he didn't kill himself. And so, you know, he came to, and they found him. She got an overdose of morphine, and he took what he thought was going to be enough to do him off. And of course, he was arrested, and there was a whole trial about it. And he's saying, you know, he didn't regret what he did, but his family as well had to go through all that trauma of seeing their father or their brother in being locked up, and understanding where he was coming from, because he was trying to help relieve her suffering. And, you know, there's no permitted assisted dying in Denmark, like in some countries. So it helped further the debate. But when you think about that as a situation as well, I mean, for him, because I've seen him being interviewed on TV about it, you know, because he was such a person who like had the gift of writing and speech and whatever. So he was very eloquent in his kind of arguments for why he did what he did and why it should be allowed, that, you know, and it brought bringing the conversation to the fore, and he's, you know, advocating for it going forward. But it just, you know, it reminded me of there's so many different ways life can take a funny turn, you know.
Next sacred segments, Brenda is also going to be on in 2 weeks' time with two other ladies who also witnessed their father killing either their mother in one case, or another close relative in another lady's case. And what's remarkable is that when I was relating this to another person and inviting them if they would like to speak on a particular subject that was related, they said, "Oh no, it's too much. I can't handle. It was too dark. It was too dark for them." And I had the thought, no, you don't quite get it. You know, that there is immense light and immense healing and immense forgiveness in the work that you have done, and it's about the survival and the witnessing and the living to tell that story. And just thank you.
You're welcome. You know, that's interesting because years ago it was about a year of negotiating to get to, it was actually a synagogue in Arizona, and these rabbis were bringing me in, and there was changes, this and that. I finally, it was negotiated. I came in, and then they had to move the venue because I was speaking and I was doing a short segment. I was on a panel on forgiveness, but then my main show had to be switched to another synagogue because one person in their community, her stepfather killed her mother, and she was just pissed. How could she tell me to forgive someone? This isn't happening. And it was interesting because then when I met with one of the rabbis who also was concerned about it, and I told her, I'm not telling anyone to forgive. You can do what you want, and people are in different places. But like you're saying, if she would have come, maybe she could have seen something that would have helped her to understand that forgiveness is not condoning, but it's getting rid of that hatred and that anger inside of yourself.
Yeah, I
And
couldn't
it's releasing yourself.
I couldn't put it into words, but you've done it. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for being here. And now I'm going to move on to the questions that I was going to ask you, Carl. So it was about hypnosis, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a person who I was told had an entity attached to them, a negative entity. And they worked with hypnosis, and they wanted to do a hypnosis presentation. And I was told, do not let that person do that, because they're going to bring in that energy, and
Oh, I see.
it's going to seep into the group. And I could feel it, you know, I could very much feel it. But it needed to be pointed out to me. And my question about hypnosis is this: do you think it's possible to transfer negative entities through hypnosis?
So, okay, that's an interesting question. I mean, fundamentally, I would say yes. I mean, it doesn't, you can do it without hypnosis. So,
Right.
so
Yeah, of course.
all you have to do is make the person vulnerable. I mean, I've
Sure.
had a negative entity that was yanked out of me in a soul rescue workshop that I attended with two people I went to do some training with in London. And it wasn't a malevolent, it was just somebody who hadn't passed on and liked my energy and wanted to still experience a bit of what was going on around in life. But the removal of it was a very physical experience for me, but also a very enlightening one. And we imagined that it must have been something I picked up when I was developing as a trance medium, and I hadn't learned the skills well, so I was more vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I you know, because in part of your question, part of it was like, do you mean that the person transferred with intent the entity, or just facilitate the entity to move? Both
Yeah,
of
I
which
think it was more than the second. Yeah.
Yes, but I think certainly both of them are possible, and certainly with hypnosis, you're introducing a person to let their guard down in different ways. So the conscious mind is still active, and the conscious mind, you can have somebody under hypnosis while they're thinking about doing stuff, and they think that they're, observing, but you're still working directly with the subconscious mind. If you look online, you'll talk about there's one where oh, I don't know what it's called now, but like, and I did this on my partner when I was training. You literally, like, you're talking to the person and you start telling their hand, you tell their hand that it's going to start raising of its own accord.
Oh, wow.
And they're looking, and they're not, you've not told them to lie down or relax or anything, but you're just being so kind of assertive to the subconscious mind. The hand starts to go up, and they're
Yes.
looking at their hand going up, and they think, what the fuck is going on? Why is my hand resting on its own?
Power of suggestion, even
It is, yes. So I do
not even
think,
verbalizing it.
yes, so when you're bringing people into hypnosis, you're creating an opening or a kind of an acceptance for their unconscious mind. And depending on that person's, let's call them natural defenses then, shall we say, they could be quite vulnerable or not.
So there's a massive responsibility that goes with being a hypnotic therapist, or
absolutely. Right. And that's why, you know, the kind of questions must never be leading questions. Yes. You know, and of course you're working with the kind of approval around certain, there's lots of different techniques. You know, you can do parts therapy where you get the person's inner parts to talk to each other because they're in conflict around certain stuff. But so in answer to your question, I would say it is possible. It can be done with intent, and it can be done accidentally. If the person has an entity that's looking to explore others, they could use that as a vehicle for hopping around. Yeah, sure.
This brings me to my second question, which is about soul rescue. Could you define what soul rescue is?
So for me, soul rescue is working to release earthbound spirits. So spirits who haven't gone to the light, we would say.
Okay. So it relates to entities again, does it?
Well, you see, entities has a negative connotation.
Okay.
So I don't like to see it as a negative connotation, because not all of them are doing things to annoy people. Some of them are just trapped. For example, one of my ex-flatmates years and years ago, a Finnish guy, he was planning to buy an apartment. And it was like in London, in East London. And there was a good price on the apartment because people knew there had been somebody murdered there.
Right.
And it just coincided with the weekend workshop when I was doing my soul rescue training with the workshop. So I thought I would help him out by going and seeing if there was any attached, energies around the building and in his apartment. And I kind of did a remote kind of visualization, but I didn't find anybody in the apartment. But the guy was sitting on the landing outstairs in the stairwell, and he was crying and he was feeling lost, and and so he hadn't moved on.
Wow.
But he wasn't there. He was obviously, in my mind, staying in the stairwell because he didn't want to kind of be impacting anybody who might buy the new property, but he didn't know where else to go.
Fascinating.
So there are these people who just, when trauma happens, sometimes it catches them unaware. So they're not ready, and they don't, if they've not had any kind of spiritual insight, they don't see that there's guides around them waiting to bring them to the light. Or sometimes, it might be grandparents who want to stay around because they have so much love for the grandchildren. They want to see them grow up, and they, forget they can do that from spirit as well. So it's not always, that's why I don't always like the word entity. Seems to have this kind of not very friendly vibe to it. So
okay. Thank you.
They can be entities as well, and then you kind of, or they can be demons as well.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to my final question, which was about the device, the pendulum. You called it radiesthesia.
Radiesthesia, yeah.
Radiesthesia. Does
Yeah.
that relate to radionic? Same.
Kind of, but I guess not quite the same, but
Not quite
similar because I guess they're kind of touching on the same frequencies.
Well, what I wanted to ask you is this: do you clear energies with that?
I do, yes.
Okay, because I had.
And I send healing commands. You can send healing commands with them as
Could you
well.
just explain how it works briefly?
Right. So so there's a number of different configurations, and they serve different purposes. So the Osiris one, which has just flat kind of batteries, you can't see them, they're called batteries, but they're just like small little discs, and it has a special head. So when its geometric configuration means that it emits white light, which is good for clearing and for healing and doing
Can you
stuff.
put it up in front of the camera?
Oh, sorry, yeah, come closer. Yay.
Interesting. It looks like an ancient design. I've seen that design.
Yes, well, these ones are called Egyptian pyramids because people believe they came from Egypt.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
So sometimes you get this with 8 or 16 little discs. And the more discs you have, the more strongly emits the frequency of the white light.
I've seen it in Thailand, I think, as well. Maybe Tibet.
Could be.
Yeah.
Then this one, if you hold it, you can see the bottom
it's
half
very
has
similar.
it's got these little semi-hemispheres.
Right.
And the top, it's got the same disc. So if it's only made of this, it's called an Osiris or Osiris. So this is Isis, and this one with just the hemispheres is Osiris, and it emits a frequency that's called either negative green or gray.
So masculine, feminine.
Kind of masculine, feminine, yeah. And the accepted teaching is that the negative green or gray is a very powerful carrier wave. So for your mental commands, this will help carry and bring that mental command to its expected target. This one here, because I've got both the Isis and the Osiris, it's kind of working as a powerful carrier for the white light from the cells, the batteries above. So it means I can use this for sending more powerful healing commands further. So if I want to remove dark energies, I will use this one. If I want to fill with white, I'll use this one.
Wow.
And if I want to do subtle kind of gentle healing, I'll use this one.
Oh, that's the one I think I've seen being used by mine who does healing work. Yeah. I was going to say, in the remaining minutes that we have left, maybe 6 minutes, are you able to demonstrate? Can you clear anything from our group right now?
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
I was going to say, can you clear something in the stairwell? I have a stairwell outside.
So, and also when I'm clearing energy, so like, I don't know if you've been on the call when Anna's been on, Anna Pavlakis, she burps a lot. I kind of, it's either like dry heaving or yawning, whichever, it depends on how intense the clearing is. So if I start doing,
thanks for the warning.
Yes, if I start going like, it's just that I feel the energy, because with me, because I do trance, I act well, and it doesn't bother me. I feel that I'm acting as a conduit. So I feel it come in through my solar plexus area and then go out.
Okay.
So it passes through me, I pull it out, and it goes out through me. So that's all. But anyway.
That's okay. I'm just preparing myself energetically.
So it's going to spin anti-clockwise because I'm going to clear all heavy negative energies from this group, any energies that are not for our highest good, any energies that are holding us back from achieving our full potential, any energies that are limiting us from acknowledging our true spirit self. connecting through our higher selves with the permission of our higher self, extracting, scrambling, and releasing all those unwanted, heavy, dissonant energies that are not for our highest good, so that we may accommodate more uplifting, vibrant frequencies of light, love, peace, and healing. Now it's winding down, so it's done a lot of it, and then I will fill with light instead afterwards. So, because we have our own conversation going, when it starts to go back and forwards, which is my yes sign, I know it's completed. So now I'll ask to fill us all with white light, golden, spiritual vibration, bringing down also the violet flame to cleanse, irradiate, heal, seal, and fill all those empty spaces that have been removed, uplifting us, raising our vibration now. Restoring our sovereignty, strengthening our connection to our I am selves. That we may go forward more integrated, more conscious, more protected. Shining more brightly. Shining that we may raise the vibration of those we come into contact with. Okay.
I could feel that. I can totally feel that. Thank you. There's a real sense of peace and calm. That was beautiful. Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really, I can really feel that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
Wow.
much. Yeah.
I felt the clearing and then I felt the light. That was
Yeah,
great.
gorgeous.
So my guide also did help. He's kind of half here. So
Yeah, I could sense his energy. I
Yeah.
could feel
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
yeah.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful session. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's close this session with gratitude and a power word. Yeah. So I'll start and we'll go around the group. So something that I'm grateful for is the frequency of color or colors and the ability to heal. And my power word, which I would like to embody and associate and connect with, is grace. Sayera, I'm going to ask you for gratitude and a power word.
Is it just one word?
Could be, yeah, whatever you feel.
Gratitude for you guys sharing and support. That's what I was going to say. And the power word, light. I don't know. Light. I don't know if it is a power word.
That's lovely. That's a lovely power word. Thank you. Great. Oh.
So yes, I was going to use the same power word, light. I think particularly after just what we've been through. And my gratitude is I'm grateful for the gift of sharing light, love, healing energies. I'm grateful for the opportunities to be able to express that fundamental aspect of my being, which is about being a channel for light and healing.
That was gorgeous. Thank you. Brenda.
So grateful, Alexis, for inviting me on here and being allowed to share my story, invited to share my story, and so grateful for the questions and the dialogue that you guys asked. That helps me too, and the connection. And I guess the power word is connection. It feels so good to feel connected.
Thank you so much. And I really wish for new avenues to open up for your show, and so that it can be heard, seen and felt globally. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That was a wonderful session. And Carl, I really hope that you can use that spinny thingy again. Let's have a focus on that, a deeper focus on those tools. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. So thank you for opening your heart and sharing.
Oh no, thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate everyone here. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening. See you in a couple of weeks. We'll keep connected on the Facebook group. And anybody want to share any links before we say goodnight?
Yes, also I want to just also say thank you. I'm grateful for that healing that Carl did.
It's okay.
Yes, just social media is easiest for me, Brenda Adelman on Facebook specifically, and I have a free Facebook group called Unforgettable Speakers Society. So come join us.
Great, thank you, Brenda. Carl, any links that you want to share?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't have any special links to share.
If people want to find you and work with you individually, where would they go?
So the best place really is Facebook. I used to have a Facebook page for my kind of healing side, but I'm not one of those kind of voracious speakers.
Self-promoters?
No, and I just find like I found I kind of was trying to force myself to post stuff on it on a regular basis because it's not me. So the best way is just through me on Facebook or spiritvoice@yahoo.com. That's my other email.
What did you say, Brenda?
I write it
Preisler, P-R-E-I-S.
Yeah, or this one.
Spiritvoice@yahoo.com.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
So
you.
that's my business email.
Great. Thanks, Carl. And
But,
Simon, do you have any
you can find me as a member of your group, and I think Brenda friended me already after her last book.
What? How do you spell your last name though?
Preisler.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. I love connecting people. It's one of my favorite things. Sayera, do you have any links that you want to share? Any projects that you're doing that you want to share with everyone?
No, but I'm on Facebook, Sayera Haque, or Sayera Haque Official on Instagram.
And how do you spell your surname?
Haque, H-A-Q-U-E.
I never knew that that's how you said it. Thank you.
Oh, well, no, because the Bengali way is Haque.
Okay, cool. Well, I'd like to quickly share my music. I was actually going to promote your music. So I have a group that's doing our first gig in 13 years in London that I formed with my ex, and my current partner's also on the drums, and we're doing a gig in London on July the 7th, which I'm really excited about. First time in 13 years. We went to Oslo to rehearse recently, and so on Spotify or Apple Music, Powerlight, all one word, Powerlight. So we have a couple of albums up there, 2 or 3 albums, and there's music videos on YouTube and stuff. So there's my little plug. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your presence. Bless you all, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Much love.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.